the discussion whether Stalin was not so bad began in Russia in the last decade, after the creation of the cult of ancestors and Putin's public regrets about the collapse of the USSR. Stalin's return to the pantheon of Russian heroes became a logical continuation of the Kremlin state policy. However, after the start of a full-scale war against Ukraine, Russia was literally covered by Stalinism. So in February 2023, in Volgograd, a bust of Stalin was opened for the arrival of Vladimir Putin. The monument has already become the second in the city. The first sculpture of the totalitarian dictator was installed back in 2019, and proposals to return the name Stalingrad to the city are regularly heard from the city administration. A similar idea was put forward in Новокузнецк.
Новокузнецк, как название города само по себе, наверное, оно...
Novokuznetsk as the name of the city is not that irrelevant, but it requires such an adjustment. This is, of course, Kuznetsk, Stalinsk, Novokuznetsk, as for example, Leninsk, Kuznetsk.
And those who are trying to talk about the real activities of Stalin, mass crimes, the creation of the Gulag concentration camp system, and the organization of genocides, including the Holodomor, simply shut up. For example, the largest Russian Center for the Protection of Human Rights, Memorial, which investigates political repressions in the USSR and conducts educational work. Back in 2014, it was recognized in Russia as a foreign agent, and in March of 2022, the legal entity was liquidated. Now, as the result of denunciations, human rights activists face long prison terms. So the head of the memorial, Oleg Orlov, is accused of rehabilitating Nazism. For this, the man faces 5 years in prison.
Under the current conditions, there can be no acquittal. Unless something fundamentally changes in the regime, unless it decides to change its purely repressive mode of action and at least create the appearance of a different regime. But so far, there are no signs that this could happen. All legislation does not comply with the rule of law, including the article on which I am being judged. Oleg Orlov, chairman of the board of the Human Rights Center Memorial, in an interview with Deutsche Welle.
According to human rights activists, this once again proves that an autocratic regime has formed in Russia. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of the territory of Ukraine, Moscow has been demanding active support from citizens for the cause, for example, by encouraging denunciations. According to former KGB officers, there are currently up to 4.5 million informers in Russia. In addition, Russia ranks 164th out of 180 in the global freedom of speech ranking. Under these conditions, Putin is trying to build the image of a new leader of himself, experts are sure, but having no achievements in the present, he relies on the past. And here the figure of Stalin is most welcome.
На сегодня Сталин фактически ставится рядом с самим Путиным.
Today, Stalin is actually placed next to Putin himself. The next stage is again playing with the theme of Tsarism, and it is quite likely that this is what awaits us. But the era of the Russian Empire and the royal family, it was not so bloodthirsty. Therefore, of course, Stalin is now winning, and at the current stage, when the authorities need to drive people to the slaughter, when it is necessary to tighten the screws inside, and this is not particularly successful, then of course Stalin is a more attractive image for them.
In order for citizens to have access to the truth and an understanding of the reasons for what is happening in Russia, the Memorial Center launched the online project 30 years before. Within its framework, human rights activists, analysts and scientists consider the main events and prerequisites that led Russia to the authoritarian Putin regime. Reported by Diana Kulesnik, Danilo Kobza, UATV News.